The day the galaxy realized the true power of a human professional army, the grand judgment chamber of the Galactic Council glowed with an eerie blue light. Ambassador Elias Ward stood alone on the central platform, a solitary human figure dwarfed by the vast circular hall. Above him, rising tiers of seats disappeared into shadow, filled with thousands of alien representatives from across the Milky Way. Their whispers created a constant background. Hiss in the massive chamber, the 7 Supreme Counselors dominated the room. From their elevated dais, each Zoraxian counselor stood nearly 4 meters tall, their bodies covered in iridescent scales that shimmered under the ceremonial lights. Multiple tentacle-like appendages emerged from their torsos, constantly moving as they communicated among themselves through subtle gestures. "Humans," rumbled High Counselor Vrax, voice echoing through translation fields across the chamber. "Your species stands accused of militarization beyond acceptable parameters." Holographic displays materialized around Ward, showing Earth's orbital defense platforms, stealth vessels, and soldiers in powered combat armor. The images rotated slowly, displayed for all representatives to see. "Despite categorical warnings upon your admission to the Confederation," continued Vrax, "Earth continues developing offensive capabilities while claiming peaceful intentions." Ward remained composed despite the weight of billions of lives resting on his shoulders. Earth had joined the Galactic Confederation only 30 years ago, still considered primitive newcomers by species who had traveled the stars for millennia. "The evidence appears irrefutable," Vrax concluded. "Such military development, from a species with your documented aggressive history, presents an unacceptable threat to galactic stability." A murmur swept through the chamber as representatives from various worlds nodded in agreement. Humans had a reputation throughout the galaxy. Dangerous, unpredictable, and far too quick to resort to violence. "Distinguished counselors," Ward began, his voice calm and measured, "we request the right to demonstrate our—" "Demonstrations are unnecessary," interrupted Counselor Thelak, a crystalline entity representing the ancient worlds of the Andromeda Arm. "The Council has deliberated and voted. Earth will submit to immediate military disarmament or face quarantine. All human vessels will be confined to your home system until compliance is verified." Ward's face betrayed nothing, but his mind raced. Quarantine would devastate Earth's economy and leave human colonies vulnerable. Disarmament, however, would be a death sentence. "With respect, counselors," Ward said, "I believe you're making a grave mistake based on incomplete information." "Your objection is noted." "Ambassador," said Vrax dismissively, "this judgment is final. Implementation will begin." The chamber's light suddenly flickered. Security alerts flashed across information terminals throughout the room. Confused murmurs rippled through the assembly as reports arrived of an unidentified fleet, materializing at the edge of the Arcturus system, home to the Council headquarters. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded Vrax, multiple tentacles writhing in agitation. "Security report." The massive view screens that lined the chamber walls activated simultaneously, displaying a woman in a crisp military uniform adorned with minimal insignia. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her expression professionally neutral. "This is General Lyra Blackwood of the Terran Defense Force," she announced, her calm voice filling the suddenly silent chamber. "We apologize for the dramatic entrance, but Earth cannot and will not disarm while the hive advances unchecked through the outer rim." The holographic displays around Ward shifted to show devastating footage. Crystalline ships unleashing energy weapons on colony worlds, settlements reduced to ash, civilian vessels fleeing only to be methodically destroyed. These were attacks the Council had dismissed as isolated incidents, attributed to rogue elements or territorial disputes. "Ambassador Ward," said Vrax, ignoring the displays, "order your military to withdraw immediately or face so." "I'm afraid I don't command our military." "Counselor," replied Ward, "in human governance, civilian leadership directs military forces, but operational control remains with military commanders. General Blackwood is here at the request of our president, but she answers to her chain of command." This revelation caused another wave of whispers. The concept was alien to most Confederation species, where civilian and military leadership were typically unified. Humanity didn't build an army to threaten the Confederation. Ward continued, eyes scanning the suddenly attentive chamber. "We built it because we recognized what you've been ignoring for centuries. The Hive isn't conducting raids or they're beginning an invasion. As if summoned by his words, emergency beacons activated throughout the chamber. A massive Hive mothership had just emerged from slipspace directly above the Council world. Panic erupted as representatives shouted questions and demands. The security feeds showed Confederation defense vessels moving to intercept, but their formation was chaotic, uncoordinated. "Order," thundered Vrax, but the panic had taken hold. Ambassador Ward stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos with unexpected authority. "The Terran Defense Force stands ready to defend this world and all Council species. General Blackwood's fleet includes our newest antimatter-equipped vessels and 2 battle groups of our most experienced combat troops." The view screen showed General Blackwood issuing rapid commands to her officers. Behind her, tactical displays revealed hundreds of human vessels moving into precise defensive formations around the Council planet. "We can debate our military parameters later," Ward said, straightening his shoulders as he addressed the stunned Council. "Right now you need to decide whether to accept the protection of the very army you were about to condemn." Vrax's tentacles twisted in complex patterns as the counselors conferred urgently. After several tense moments, the High Counselor spoke. "Ambassador Ward, the Council requests Earth's assistance in this matter." Ward nodded once. "General Blackwood has already engaged the Hive forces. I suggest we evacuate non-essential personnel from this facility." As if to punctuate his words, the chamber shuddered from a distant impact. The security feed showed the first exchange of fire between human vessels and the Hive mothership. "Counselor Vrax," said an aide, rushing to the dais with a data tablet. "The human ships they're deploying unusual tactics. They're effective. The Hive vessels are having difficulty targeting them." Ward allowed himself a small smile. "Humans have a long history of warfare, Counselor. It's given us certain advantages in combat situations." "You expected this attack," said Thalak, the crystalline counselor, realization dawning. "Your military presence wasn't coincidental." "We've been tracking Hive movements for years," Ward confirmed. "Their pattern of expansion made this attack inevitable. We tried to warn the Council through diplomatic channels, but our concerns were dismissed as paranoia from a militaristic species." Another, more violent tremor shook the chamber. The view screen showed human vessels executing complex maneuvers that confused the Hive targeting systems while delivering precision strikes against the mothership's vulnerable points. "How? Do they know the Hive weaknesses?" demanded one of the counselors. "Even our most advanced research teams haven't identified structural vulnerabilities in their vessels." "Because humans specialize in finding weaknesses," Ward explained. "It's what we do. Our entire military doctrine revolves around identifying and exploiting vulnerabilities per Q in tactics, in technology, in psychology." The security feeds showed the Hive mothership listing to one side. Massive breaches visible in its crystalline hull. Human dropships were launching toward the damaged sections. "What are they doing?" asked Vrax, watching the dropships with confusion. "Boarding parties," said Ward. "Our soldiers will capture the command center and secure intelligence about Hive movements and plans." "Boarding a hostile vessel?" Thalak's crystalline form pulsed with alarm. "That's primitive, barbaric, but effective," countered Ward. "And necessary if we want to understand what we're facing." As evacuation orders echoed through the chamber, Ward faced the Council one final time. "What you're witnessing, distinguished representatives, is merely a fraction of Earth's military capability. Not because we love war, but because we understand it better than any species in the Confederation. And right now, that understanding might be the only thing standing between civilization and extinction." The Council chamber emptied as representatives hurried toward shelter areas. Outside, human vessels continued their precise dance of destruction against the invading Hive ships. In the observation deck overlooking the battle, Ambassador Ward stood with Counselor Mira, the only member who had studied human history. They watched as Earth's military demonstrated why humans had survived thousands of years of internal conflict to emerge as a unified, spacefaring civilization. "I voted against the disarmament order," Mira admitted quietly. "I knew there was purpose behind your military buildup." Ward nodded. "Humans prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. It's kept us alive through countless disasters. The Council will have questions when this is over," Mira warned. "Many will still fear human military power." They should, Ward replied, watching as human troops secured the crippled Hive mothership. But they should fear what happens without it even more. In the Co. The day the galaxy realized the true power of a human professional army. 3 days after the emergency at the council chambers, Admiral Marcus Reynolds stood on the bridge of the TDF Indomitable, Earth's newest dreadnought. Through the massive view screen, he watched as the combined galactic defense fleet struggled against the crystalline Hive ships above Arcturus Prime. Dozens of vessels from different species maneuvered in the darkness of space, energy weapons flashing against the starfield. Their formations are chaotic, noted Lieutenant Commander Olivia Reeves, tactical officer. Her fingers danced over holographic controls as she analyzed the battle in real time. No coordination between species. Each fleet is fighting its own war. Reynolds nodded grimly. He was a veteran of Earth's unification wars, his weathered face bearing the subtle scars of 2 decades in combat. The Confederation's military doctrine emphasized individual excellence. Each species had developed specialized ships and tactics over millennia, but they rarely trained together. Against the hive-minded crystalline invaders, their disorganization was proving fatal. Deploy battle groups Alpha through Delta in staggered formation, ordered Reynolds, his deep voice calm despite the stakes. Maintain tight communications discipline, and follow the Thermopylae Protocol. Throughout the bridge, human officers acknowledged the orders with practiced efficiency. No wasted motion, no unnecessary chatter, just the quiet competence of professionals who had trained together for years. 100 Earth vessels, each a fraction of the size of most alien. Ships' air moved with choreographed precision into positions that seemed random to observers but followed mathematical patterns refined through centuries of human warfare. On Naboo, the Council observation deck. Alien representatives watched in confusion as the human fleet appeared to scatter, rather than concentrate their firepower. "What madness is this?" demanded Counselor Zal, a methane-breathing entity whose translucent body pulsed with agitation. They divide their forces against a superior enemy? This confirms their primitive understanding of space combat. Ambassador Elias Ward, now flanked by 2 Council security officers, smiled thinly. "Humans have been fighting wars against overwhelming odds since before we discovered fire, Counselor. Perhaps observe before passing judgment." The human vessels began executing rapid, coordinated micro-jumps, appearing briefly to deliver devastating weapons fire before vanishing again. The Hive ships, accustomed to straightforward engagements with predictable enemies, found themselves unable to lock onto the constantly moving targets. "I don't understand," said a reptilian observer, scales shifting color in confusion. "Their vessels are jumping randomly." "Not randomly," corrected Counselor Mira, the only member who had studied human military history. Her 4 eyes narrowed as she analyzed the pattern. "They're hurting the enemy, creating a kill box." Aboard the Indomitable, Reynolds watched as his carefully orchestrated battle plan unfolded. Human vessels struck from multiple vectors simultaneously, withdrawing before the Hive could respond effectively. Each attack seemed minor in isolation, but together they were driving the crystalline fleet into a predetermined zone. "Sir, Hive command ship is entering position Omega," reported Commander Jason Drake from the tactical station. "Gravitational web is ready to deploy." Reynolds nodded once. "Spring the trap." Throughout the battle space, hidden gravitational projectors activated simultaneously, creating a 3-dimensional web of distortion fields that immobilized the Hive command ship. Cut off from its support vessels and unable to maneuver, the massive crystalline structure found itself isolated in open space. "All battle groups, execute convergence maneuver," ordered Reynolds. "Target resonance points and fire on my mark." The scattered human fleet suddenly changed direction, converging from all directions toward the trapped Hive command ship. Their smaller weapons, fired in perfect synchronization, created a resonance pattern that overwhelmed the crystalline hull's structural integrity. On the Council observation deck, the assembled aliens watched in stunned silence as the massive Hive vessel shattered into countless glittering fragments. Without central coordination, the remaining Hive ships fell into disarray, making them easy targets for the combined Confederation forces. "Impossible," whispered Counselor Zal. "Their weapons are individually inferior to ours. How did they achieve such effectiveness?" "Coordination," explained Ward. Humans understand that warfare isn't about individual excellence. It's about synchronized action toward a common objective. Our ships and weapons may be less advanced, but they work together perfectly. The battle concluded within hours. A conflict the Council's military experts had predicted would last days, possibly weeks. The remaining Hive vessels retreated into slipspace, leaving behind the wreckage of their command ship and dozens of destroyed crystalline cruisers. In the aftermath, as emergency crews worked to save the Council world below, Admiral Reynolds received an unexpected transmission from the Galactic High Command. A request for human officers to provide tactical training to Confederation forces. They're quick learners, Reynolds remarked to Ambassador Ward during their secure communication. The ambassador's holographic image hovered above the tactical display on the Indomitable's bridge. But they still don't understand what they're asking for. Ward's expression darkened. They haven't seen our real capabilities yet, and I'm not sure the galaxy is ready for what happens when humans fight at full capacity. Reynolds turned as Commander Drake approached with a data tablet. Sir, we've analyzed the intelligence recovered from the Hive command ship. It's concerning. The Admiral reviewed the data, his experienced eyes quickly grasping the implications. They've been planning this invasion for nearly a century, and this was just the first wave. The Council needs to know, said Ward from the holographic display. Agreed, Reynolds replied, but first we need to prepare our response. The next wave will be larger, better coordinated. They'll have adapted to our tactics, and we'll have adapted in return, Ward noted. That's what humans do best. 12 hours later, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session aboard the Indomitable. The human vessel's conference room was utilitarian compared to the ornate council chambers, emphasizing function over form. Admiral Reynolds stood before the assembled representatives, displaying the recovered Hive battle plans on the room's holographic projector. The crystalline invaders had mapped invasion routes for every major Confederation world, with detailed analyses of defensive capabilities and estimated casualty figures. This isn't a border dispute or a resource grab, Reynolds explained. The Hive intends to eradicate all non-crystalline life forms in the galaxy. They view organic species as inherently inferior, a contamination to be cleansed. The Council representatives reacted with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Their civilizations had enjoyed millennia of relative peace, with only occasional conflicts quickly resolved through negotiation or limited military action. The concept of total war was alien to most of them. Even if what you say is true, argued Councillor Thalak, the Confederation's combined fleets outnumber the Hive forces 10-1. We can overwhelm them with superior numbers. Reynolds exchanged a glance with Ambassador Ward before responding. Numbers alone don't win wars, Counselor. The Hive operates with perfect coordination, each ship an extension of their collective consciousness. Against such an enemy, traditional Confederation tactics will fail. What do you propose, Admiral? Asked High Counselor Vrax, who had been unusually quiet throughout the meeting. Integration, Reynolds answered simply. The Confederation forces must learn to fight as a unified military, rather than individual species-based fleets. We need standardized communications, coordinated training, and joint command structures. Impossible, scoffed Counselor Zell. Each species has its own combat traditions dating back thousands of years. You cannot expect us to abandon our heritage for human military doctrines. I don't, Reynolds replied calmly. I expect you to evolve it, just as humans did. He activated a new holographic display showing Earth's military history of centuries of warfare that gradually developed from chaotic, tribal conflicts to the precision-coordinated, professional forces that now defended the Confederation. Humans didn't create effective military structures because we're inherently warlike, Reynolds explained. We created them because we had to survive our own worst impulses. Every tactic, every strategy, every protocol we use today was developed and refined through blood and sacrifice. The display shifted to show human training. Exercises from soldiers from dozens of nations, working seamlessly together despite different languages, cultures, and traditions. What you witnessed in the battle against the Hive wasn't just technology or firepower, continued Reynolds. It was the application of hard-won knowledge that humans have accumulated through thousands of years of conflict. He looked at each council member in turn, his expression grave. The Confederation has never faced an existential threat before. You've never needed to fight for your collective survival. Humans have done little else throughout our history. The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. The very aspects of human nature that had... The day the galaxy realized the true power of a human professional Army Major Diana, Frost crouched behind the shattered remains of what had once been a Confederation research outpost on Epsilon Indi IV. The pale blue sun cast long shadows across the ruined complex as it dipped toward the horizon. Around her, 24 soldiers from her Special Operations Unit, the 7th Orbital Dropshock Battalion, checked their equipment and reviewed tactical data on their helmet displays. 6 weeks into what was now officially called the Crystalline War, human military advisors had been deployed throughout Confederation space. Frost's mission was different. Her team had been sent to retrieve critical research data from a facility overrun by Hive forces 3 days earlier. "I don't understand why they sent ground troops," said Trell, a Rixian observer assigned to Frost's unit. The four-armed alien's copper-colored exoskeleton gleamed in the fading light. His species had abandoned physical combat millennia ago, relying entirely on automated defense systems and drones. "Your ships could simply destroy the facility from orbit." Frost tapped her neural interface, displaying a three-dimensional map of the complex. Her face was all sharp angles framed by short-cropped gray hair despite her relative youth. Side effect of the genetic modifications that enhanced her combat abilities. "The research contains breakthrough data on hive biology," she explained patiently. "We need to retrieve it intact. Orbital bombardment would destroy what we came to recover. But the risk out is acceptable," Frost finished, checking the power cell on her pulse rifle. "This is what we do." Trell's compound eyes blinked in sequence, an expression of confusion in his species. "The Confederation abandoned ground combat centuries ago. It's considered primitive," Frost smiled thinly. "Sometimes the old ways are the most effective." What followed shocked the alien observer. Rather than a frontal assault, Frost split her small force into 5 teams. 3 created diversions that drew the hive defenders away from the facility's core, while Frost led a 2-person infiltration team through maintenance tunnels. The 5th team remained in reserve, ready to extract any compromised units. The human soldiers moved with a fluid coordination that seemed almost telepathic. They anticipated each other's actions without communication, adapted instantly to changing conditions, and employed weapons and tactics that exploited weaknesses in hive physiology that even the Confederation scientists hadn't identified. Trell watched through the tactical feed as Frost's infiltration team navigated the dark tunnels beneath the research facility. They moved like predators, more silent, efficient, deadly. Each motion was purposeful, each decision made with lightning speed. When a hive patrol detected Frost's team, she didn't retreat as Trell expected. Instead, she executed a maneuver the humans called advance to contact, and deliberately engaging the enemy on terms favorable to her forces. Frost and her partner, Sergeant Luis Vega, split up at a junction. As crystalline hive drones pursued Frost down one corridor, Vega circled behind them and deployed a sonic disruptor, a weapon specifically designed to shatter the crystalline being's resonance patterns. The hive drones collapsed into fragments, unable to maintain their structural integrity under the targeted sonic assault. "Major Frost," Trell transmitted over the secure channel. "How did you know the sonic weapon would be effective?" "Our scientists have been studying the hive for decades without discovering that vulnerability. We tested it," Frost replied simply as she continued toward the facility's central database. "Humans don't assume we understand an enemy. We experiment until we find what works." The remainder of the operation proceeded with precision that bordered on artistry. The diversion teams kept the main hive force occupied while Frost and Vega reached the central database, extracted the research data, and placed demolition charges at key structural points. From the evacuation shuttle, Trell watched in astonishment as the humans extracted not only the research data, but also 3 Confederation scientists who had been presumed dead. The facility was destroyed in a precisely calculated explosion that eliminated pursuing hive forces without damaging the surrounding ecosystem. "Your soldiers fight as though they've faced the hive for generations," Trell remarked during the return journey. "How is this possible?" "Your species only encountered them 6 weeks ago." Frost removed her combat helmet, revealing a face marked with the scars of previous conflicts. Because humans have been fighting each other for our entire history. Everything we know about warfare, every strategy, every tacticale was developed and refined through blood and sacrifice against opponents who thought exactly like we do. She gazed out at the stars, streaking past the shuttle's viewport. The hive may be alien, but they're predictable. Humans spent thousands of years fighting enemies who could anticipate our every move because they were human too. That forced us to master the unpredictable. When the shuttle docked with the human carrier vessel TDF Horizons, Frost's team was met by Admiral Hector Diaz, commander of the Combined Special Operations Task Force. His weathered face broke into a rare smile as Frost presented the recovered data module. "Well done, Major," he said, taking the module. "The research team is waiting to analyze the data. If we're lucky, it contains the key to understanding hive communication systems." In the ship's tactical center, Frost and her team debriefed senior officers while Trell observed from a designated area for Confederation representatives. The Rixian watched with growing fascination as the humans discussed the operation, analyzing failures, identifying opportunities for improvement, and integrating new observations about hive behavior into their tactical database. "They're learning," Trell murmured to Liaison Officer Thomas Reed, his assigned human guide. "Every encounter teaches them something new about the enemy." Reed nodded. "That's the human way. We adapt faster than any species in the Confederation because we've been adapting to threats our entire history." When the debriefing concluded, Admiral Diaz addressed the gathered officers. "The hive is massing for a major offensive against the Procyon sector. Based on the intelligence Major Frost recovered, they plan to target the agricultural worlds that supply food to over 30 Confederation systems." Holographic displays showed the projected invasion route. Three-pronged attack, designed to overwhelm the sector's minimal defenses. The Procyon worlds had never needed significant military protection, located as they were deep within Confederation space. "Conventional wisdom would suggest we concentrate our forces here," Diaz continued, indicating the narrow corridor where the three prongs converged. "But conventional tactics won't work against the hive." Major Frost's team discovered something crucial about hive psychology. Frost stepped forward. "The hive operates on consensus, but that consensus requires time to form. If multiple threats emerge simultaneously, their collective decision-making process becomes paralyzed, forcing individual hive units to act independently, which means they lose their greatest advantage, our perfect coordination," Diaz concluded. "We'll exploit this weakness by deploying multiple, small strike forces rather than concentrating our fleet." Trell watched as human officers quickly developed an unconventional battle plan that violated most of the Confederation's established military doctrines. Instead of defending key positions, they would conduct simultaneous offensive operations against hive staging areas. Rather than meeting force with greater force, they would use minimal resources to create maximum disruption. When the meeting ended, Trell approached Frost as she prepared to lead her team on another mission. "Major, I must report my observations to the Confederation Council." "What should I tell them?" Frost considered the question carefully. "Tell them that humans don't fight to demonstrate superiority or to secure territory. We fight to win using whatever means necessary. Sometimes that requires violence. Sometimes it requires restraint. But it always requires understanding not just the enemy's capabilities but their psychology." She secured her equipment harness, checking each connection methodically. "The hive thinks it understands warfare because it studied the Confederation's predictable tactics for centuries. But humans bring something the galaxy hasn't seen before, and not superior technology or numbers, but an entirely different way of thinking about conflict." In her secure report to Earth Command that night, Frost included an observation. "The Confederation species are beginning to understand. They're starting to see that humanity's greatest weakness, our history of conflict, may be the galaxy's salvation." 2 days later, Frost's team deployed to Procyon Beta, one of the agricultural worlds in the hive's path. Unlike previous missions, they weren't tasked with combat operations. Instead, they were to train local defense forces in human guerrilla tactics. The locals, AOWs, a species of six-limbed agrarians who had known peace for over 1,000 years, initially resisted the human methods. Their culture emphasized harmony and cooperation, concepts seemingly at odds with the brutal efficiency of human warfare. "We cannot become like you," their leader, an elder named Drawl told Frost during their first meeting. Our society would not survive it. The day the galaxy realized the true power of a human professional Army General Victor Ramirez stood in the war room aboard the TDF command carrier Lexington, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of over 2,000 human warships and 15,000 Confederation vessels. The massive chamber hummed with activity as officers from dozens of species coordinated the largest combined fleet in galactic history. After 3 months of fighting, the combined forces had pushed the hive back from the core worlds, but intelligence suggested the invaders were regrouping for a massive counterattack. Ramirez was a tall, broad-shouldered man with dark eyes that missed nothing. His close-cropped hair had gone completely gray during the conflict, though he was only in his early 50s. As Supreme Commander of the Combined Defense Forces, he carried the weight of countless lives on his shoulders. "The Confederation wants to press the advantage," reported Colonel James Wilson, his liaison to the alien command structure. "Their commanders are eager to pursue the retreating hive forces." Ramirez studied the tactical display, where glowing icons represented fleet movements across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "They're still thinking like peacekeepers, not warfighters," he said, his voice quiet but carrying authority that made even the alien officers in the room pay attention. "Tell our liaison officers to recommend defensive positions. The hive retreat is too orderly." Across the table, Glaxar, the newly appointed Confederation military coordinator, bristled visibly. The reptilian alien represented the combined interests of the 17 species now fighting alongside humanity. His scaled skin rippled with colors that betrayed his irritation. "With respect, General," Glaxar said, the translation field giving his hissing voice an artificial smoothness. "Our numerical advantage is significant. Victory is within reach if we pursue aggressively." The alien gestured to the display, where hive forces appeared to be withdrawing from multiple sectors simultaneously. "They are broken. We must not allow them time to regroup." Ramirez manipulated the holographic display, highlighting patterns in the hive movements that others had missed. Red lines connected seemingly unrelated retreats, revealing a cohesive strategy that wasn't immediately apparent. "This isn't retreat, it's redeployment," he explained, voice still calm but with an edge of steel beneath. "They're drawing us into a trap." The human general zoomed in on a particular sector near the Cygnus arm. "Their ships are maintaining precise formation even during withdrawal. That indicates central control, not panic. And their course corrections are too deliberate. They're choosing their path carefully." Glaxar's scales shifted to a darker hue. "You suggest they want us to follow?" "I'm certain of it," Ramirez replied. "And I believe I know where they're leading us." He adjusted the display again, showing a massive gas giant with dozens of moons in a system the hive had recently abandoned. Perfect place for an ambush. Gravitational interference would mask energy signatures of a large fleet until we're committed to the engagement. The Confederation representatives murmured among themselves, their various communication methods varying from subsonic rumbles to light patterns, creating a discordant backdrop to the discussion. "Your caution is noted, General," Glaxar said finally, "but the Confederation Council has already voted. The pursuit will proceed as planned." Ramirez's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. "Very well. Please inform the Council that I'll adjust our strategy accordingly." After the alien representatives departed, Colonel Wilson approached Ramirez cautiously. "Sir, what are we going to do? If the Confederation forces charge into that trap, they'll be slaughtered," Ramirez finished. "And we can't allow that to happen. Not just for humanitarian reasons, but because we need their ships and resources to win this war." He turned to his Chief of Staff, Commander Alicia Navarro. "Implement Operation Thunderstrike. Authorization code Delta 7 Epsilon." Navarro's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded and moved to a secure communications station. Operation Thunderstrike was a contingency plan developed specifically for this scenario, situation where Confederation forces moved against human military advice into a dangerous position. Without seeking permission from either Earth or the Confederation, Ramirez took unprecedented action. As the main Confederation fleet pursued the retreating hive ships, human intelligence operators monitored the expected ambush point, the gas giant exactly where Ramirez had predicted. "General, we're detecting energy signatures consistent with a large hive fleet hiding in the L4, and L5 Lagrange points of the gas giant, reported Lieutenant Emma Brooks from the sensor station. Estimate at least 3,000 vessels are more than enough to trap the pursuing Confederation force. Ramirez nodded grimly. Execute primary phase of Thunderstrike. Throughout the system, 500 human stealth vessels that had been positioned days earlier, before the Hive even began their withdrawal, simultaneously decloaked and launched a devastating strike against the ambush force. The attack came from multiple vectors, targeting Hive command and control systems with surgical precision. On the main tactical display, the hidden Hive fleet suddenly appeared as red icons, followed immediately by the green symbols representing the human stealth force. The Hive vessels, caught completely by surprise, broke formation as they attempted to respond to an attack they hadn't anticipated. Simultaneously, Ramirez deployed the Terran Third Fleet not to reinforce the Confederation's pursuit as expected, but to secure their withdrawal routes. Human vessels positioned themselves at strategic choke points, ensuring the Confederation forces could retreat if necessary. In the council chamber aboard the Confederation flagship Eternal Vigilance, alien representatives watched in shock as the human vessels revealed both the trap and their solution simultaneously. They knew, whispered Counselor Mira to High Counselor Vrax. Ramirez predicted exactly what the Hive was. Planning. More than that, Vrax replied, multiple eyes blinking in sequence. He prepared a countermeasure days ago, before we even made our decision to pursue. The communications officer, a bioluminescent Quantari, flashed urgent patterns across his skin. Incoming transmission from General Ramirez. Ramirez's image appeared in the center of the chamber, projected from the Lexington. Counselors, the Hive ambush has been neutralized. I recommend the Confederation fleet hold position while we complete the operation. Vrax's appendages twisted in agitation. General, you deployed forces without council authorization. This is a direct violation of our command agreement. With respect, Counselor, Ramirez replied evenly. I deployed forces to save your fleet from destruction. Had I waited for authorization, we would now be discussing casualties instead of victory. The tactical feed showed the human stealth vessels continuing their precision strikes against the disorganized Hive forces. Without their carefully planned ambush, the crystalline ships were struggling to form an effective defense. 6 hours later, when the operation concluded, Glaxar and a delegation of senior Confederation officers arrived aboard the Lexington for an emergency conference. The atmosphere in the war room was tense as Glaxar confronted Ramirez. You deliberately withheld your strategy, the alien accused, scales pulsing with angry colors. You anticipated the Council's decision and prepared a counter-move without consultation. Yes, Ramirez acknowledged without apology. Because that's how humans wage war. We don't just respond to what the enemy does us, we anticipate what they'll do next and what we'll do after that. The General activated a new holographic display showing a complex web of contingency, plans extending 12 steps into the future era, each with branches and sub-branches. Accounting for countless variables, the alien officers stared at the display in stunned silence. This is how human military planning works, Ramirez explained. We call it strategic depth. Every human commander is trained to develop multiple contingency plans, to think many moves ahead, and to prepare for both success and failure simultaneously. He zoomed in on one section of the display, showing 5 different responses to the current situation. Right now we're executing Contingency Alpha, but I have 4 other operations ready to implement depending on how the Hive responds. Glaxar studied the display, his natural skepticism giving way to reluctant understanding. The complexity is impressive, but such planning requires assumptions about enemy behavior. Correct, Ramirez said. We study our opponents obsessively. Not just their capabilities, but their psychology, their cultural imperatives, their decision-making processes. The Hive thinks collectively but lacks imagination. That makes them predictable to those who understand how collective intelligence operates. Commander Navarro approached with a data tablet. Sir, Hive forces are regrouping at Epsilon Eridani. Patterns suggest preparation for a major offensive against the Arcturus sector. Ramirez nodded. Implement Contingency Charlie. Deploy the 5th and 7th fleets to intercept, and have Major Frost's special operations teams prepare for ground insertion on these 3 planets. He highlighted. The day the galaxy realized the true power of a human professional army, the ceremonial chamber of the Arcturus Peace Summit hummed with tension as representatives from all Confederation species gathered alongside delegates from the defeated Hive Collective. The vast circular room, rebuilt after the initial Hive attack months earlier, now served as the site for what promised to be the most significant diplomatic event in recent galactic history. Soft blue light filtered down from the domed ceiling, illuminating the assembled dignitaries. Field Marshal Helena Torres, Supreme Commander of Earth's Combined Forces, stood with perfect military posture beside Ambassador Elias Ward. Unlike the alien representatives in their ceremonial attire, Torres wore a simple dress uniform with minimal decorations despite her numerous accolades. Her weathered face and steel-gray eyes reflected decades of service, while her short silver hair was cut to regulation length. The Hive delegate, a crystalline entity that refracted light in hypnotic patterns, occupied a specially designed containment field across the chamber. After 8 months of relentless conflict that had spanned 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, the crystalline invaders had finally requested negotiations. "The terms are acceptable," announced the Hive delegate, its translucent body pulsing with inner light that corresponded to its speech patterns. "The collective will withdraw from contested systems and establish a demilitarized zone, as specified in the agreement." Murmurs rippled through the assembled representatives. The proposed treaty would end hostilities that had cost billions of lives and destroyed hundreds of worlds. For many species, the prospect of Pisa Reni Pisa was worth almost any concession. High Counselor Vrax, who had once demanded Earth's disarmament in this very system, now looked uncertainly toward the human representatives, his multiple tentacles twisted in what humans had learned to recognize as a gesture of deference. "Field Marshal Torres," Vrax said, "your assessment of the proposed terms?" The request itself represented a profound shift in the galactic power structure. Before the war, no human would have been consulted on matters of Confederation security. Now every eye in the chamber turned to Torres, waiting for her judgment. "The terms are inadequate," Torres replied calmly, her voice carrying across the chamber without need for amplification. "They make no provisions for verification, establish no consequences for violations, and leave the Hive production facilities intact." The chamber erupted in murmurs. After months of devastating war, most species desperately wanted peace. The Hive delegate's crystalline surface pulsed with what humans had learned to recognize as agitation. "Humans demand unreasonable assurances," it protested. "The collective has conceded defeat. We seek only to return to our traditional territories." Torres activated her neural interface, projecting data into the chamber's shared information space. Complex diagrams and intercepted communications appeared before each representative. "Our intelligence indicates the Hive is developing biological weapons specifically tailored to target oxygen-breathing species," she stated. "The crystalline composition of their bodies makes them immune to such agents. They're not seeking peace. They're buying time to develop a weapon that could eliminate all potential opposition without destroying infrastructure they wish to claim." Ambassador Ward stepped forward, his diplomatic training evident in his measured tone. "The Terran Defense Force is prepared to initiate Operation Verdun if negotiations fail to address these concerns." The name meant nothing to the alien representatives. For the Hive delegate's crystalline structure suddenly dimmed, a sign of fear that surprised the Confederation observers. "You wouldn't," it said, vibrations changing to a frequency that indicated distress. "Even humans wouldn't cross that threshold." In the tense silence that followed, Ward addressed the Council directly. 3 weeks ago, when we discovered the Hive's biological weapons program, Earth's Security Council unanimously authorized the Verdun protocol named after a battle from our First World War where humanity learned the true meaning of total commitment to victory. He displayed the operational plans or comprehensive strategy to systematically isolate and neutralize every Hive world, using a combination of conventional, gravitational, and newly developed quantum disruptor weapons that could shatter the crystalline biology of the Hive at the molecular level. "This isn't a threat," explained Torres, her expression remaining neutral despite the gravity of her words. "It's a promise of what will happen if the Hive forces us to choose between their extinction and the risk to oxygen-breathing life throughout the galaxy. Humanity has faced extinction-level threats before. We know exactly what we're willing to do to survive." The silence in the chamber deepened as the implications sank in. The Confederation species had known humans were effective warriors, but few had understood the depths of their resolve when truly threatened. In the chamber's stunned silence, the Hive delegates' crystalline structure shifted to a submission pattern never before seen by Confederation observers. The collective will accept expanded terms, including verification protocols and complete disarmament. Hours later, as the revised treaty was being formalized in a smaller conference room, Counselor Mira approached Torres privately. The four-eyed alien had been one of the few council members to support humanity from the beginning. "You never intended to implement the Verdun Protocol, did you?" Mira asked quietly. It was a calculated escalation to force compliance. Torres studied the alien counselor carefully before answering. "The greatest victory is the battle not fought. Sun Tzu wrote that over 3,000 years ago, and every human commander studies his work. But would you have done it if they hadn't conceded?" Torres's expression remained impassive, but her eyes held the weight of centuries of human conflict. "The galaxy should be grateful it didn't have to find out. Because the true power of a human professional army isn't in our weapons or tactics or even our strategic thinking." "Then what is it?" pressed Mira. "It's that we understand the full spectrum of warfare, from diplomacy to total annihilation, and are prepared to operate at any point along that spectrum if necessary." Torres looked out at the stars visible through the chamber's transparent dome. Today, the galaxy witnessed only a fraction of humanity's capacity for war. Let's all work to ensure it never sees more than that. The formal signing ceremony took place the following day in the Grand Council chamber, with representatives from every affected world in attendance. As the Hive delegate and the Confederation Council applied their various forms of signature to the treaty, Ambassador Ward stood beside Field Marshal Torres at the back of the chamber. 8 months ago, they were ready to disarm us by force, Ward remarked quietly. Now they're implementing our security protocols throughout Confederation space. "Fear is a powerful motivator," Torres replied. "First they feared us. Then they feared the Hive more than they feared us. Now they fear what might happen if another threat emerges without human military expertise to counter it." "Is fear the foundation we want for humanity's relationship with the galaxy?" Ward asked, the diplomat in him concerned with long-term relations. Torres considered the question. "Fear is a beginning, not an end. It creates respect. Respect creates opportunity for understanding. Understanding leads to trust. But none of that happens if they disarmed us 8 months ago." The ceremony concluded with an unexpected announcement from High Counselor Vrax. The ancient Zoraxian, whose species had dominated Confederation politics for millennia, formally proposed the creation of a galactic defense force based on human military principles with joint command shared between Confederation species and Earth. "The recent conflict has demonstrated the inadequacy of our previous security arrangements," Vrax stated, tentacles moving in elaborate patterns of formal declaration. "Humanity has shown us not merely how to fight, but how to think about conflict in ways our peaceful civilization had forgotten." After the ceremony, Torres met with her senior officers in a secure conference room aboard the human flagship Resolute. The mood was subdued despite their victory. Too many had died. Too many worlds had been lost for true celebration. "The Hive is contained for now," Torres told her assembled commanders, "but they won't be the last threat we face. The galaxy is vast, and we've only explored a fraction of it." Admiral Marcus Reynolds, who had commanded the space forces during the early stages of the war, leaned forward. "What's our next step, Marshal?" "The Confederation is already asking for human officers to help establish training academies across their territories. We'll provide the assistance they need," Torres replied, "but we'll maintain our own independent military capability. The lesson of this war isn't that humans should defend the galaxy. It's that every species should be capable of defending themselves." Major Diana Frost, recently promoted after her successful special operations during the conflict, nodded in agreement. "We've been teaching Confederation species our tactics throughout the war. Many of them have proven to be quick learners." "Indeed," said Torres, "and that's the real victory here. Not defeating the Hive, but changing how the Confederation thinks about security and defense."